it pretty strong. One of our executive producers, Rick Brown, was in the Pasadena area, joining us now by phone. Rick, I can only imagine what you felt in the Pasadena area because it was quite the shaking here in Studio City. Oh, maybe he can't hear me. All right, well, we're going to get to Rick in just a little bit, but certainly a wild and bumpy ride here just about 8 minutes ago. I'm hearing now that, Rick, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Amy. Can you hear me?
Yes, and Rick, I got to tell you, here in the studio, which is, you know, a good distance from the center of this earthquake, we got quite the shaking going on in here, and you're in the Pasadena area. Tell me what you felt.
We probably are a mile and a half from the epicenter, which was on Huntington Drive in Highland Park. And we're in the very southern part of Pasadena on the South Pass border. It was intense shaking for 20 seconds. Things on the shelves started to wiggle and move, but nothing fell down. And then we had a very intense jolt. And you could hear the rumbling. It was very intense here. I'd like to see which fault this was. There is a fault that doesn't get a lot of attention called the Raymond Fault, and it runs at the base of the St. Gabriel's. It goes under Dodger Stadium, and it follows the Santa Monica Mountains to the ocean. The biggest one on that fault zone was in 1990. The most recent one, it was a 5.0. So this, and let's fact check this, but I think this is the strongest one in 30 years on the Raymond Fault. And seismologists keep an eye on it. They're very concerned. They say it is capable of a 7.0, a catastrophic quake. So very interesting to see which fault this was, and the shaking here was intense.
Yes, I can only imagine, Rick. You know, growing up here, I don't often get rattled by these. I, you know, kind of shrug them off. But this honestly was one where I was thinking I needed to get under the desk here in the studio because, like you said, it started out kind of rumbling, and I thought, is somebody doing construction in the building? Sometimes a big truck, you know, something rumbling. And then all of a sudden, it got stronger, started to shake more. You could hear that rumbling, and that's when I thought, I need to get under the desk. And so, did you feel like you needed to get under a table, or did you, you know, think that you needed to seek safer ground?
We were seated having lunch, and we were a second away from going under the dining room table. It was that intense, and it was an unusual one, too. I'd like to hear Dr. Lucy Jones debrief on it, because usually you hear people describe, oh, it was a roller or it was a jolt. And this one was both, which I think makes it a little unusual, but I'd like to hear what Lucy Jones says about that.
Yeah, you know, Rick, I agree with you because it has now been upgraded to a 4.4. And what I was feeling in here felt a whole lot stronger than a 4.4. Usually anything in the fours, you know, we feel it definitely, but it never makes me think I need to get under a desk. But this 4.4 was one of the strongest that I have felt in quite some time. So like you said, I wonder if it was more of that, the jolt and the rumbling and the shaking. It just seemed like it was a whole lot all in one.
It sure was. And this part of Pasadena, we're on solid granite. It was formed by a massive quake thousands and thousands of years ago. There's a landmark here called Raymond Hill that has views from here to the ocean, and it's that was all shot up by that earthquake. And so usually we don't feel them that strongly because, as we know, the earthquake waves, they bounce off solid granite, and they seek ground that is less dense and less firm, which is why people in the basin, because it's all filled with alluvial sand, the basin tends to have more people describing the strong feelings of the rolling, and the waves seek out that weak land, usually not here on solid granite. And that also speaks to the intensity of this event.
Well, and Rick, you know, you were talking earlier about that fault line, the Raymond Fault, and the last earthquake being in 1990. Something tells me you just knew that off the cuff because you are a plethora of information. Were you around in 1990? Did you feel that one too?
I was. We started KCAL in 1990. I was here for that. but I do not recall that quick. I was not living in the San Gabriel Valley at the time, Amy.
Okay, I was just wondering if you could compare it to us, because this one certainly felt stronger than a 4.4. And like you, I'll be very interested to hear exactly why this one was felt so intense here. I mean, we're at least 14 miles away from there here in Studio City, and it felt, when I was feeling that, I thought this is a really big one or it's very close. And, you know, it was 14 miles away and only a 4.4, but certainly felt much larger than that. So we'll have to find out from Dr. Lucy Jones or someone there who can give us more information about exactly what happened with that earthquake. And Marina's here to. Oh,
it was 4.9 in 1988 on that Raymond fault. And a lot of people also expressed that same feeling, that it was more of a jolting than a rolling. And so that just is indicative of what the Raymond fault is capable of. And like he had mentioned, it is capable of a 7 magnitude, but 1988 was the last magnitude 4.9, and that was in Pasadena as well. And it's in northeastern LA, so it kind of passes over not only South Pasadena, but San Marino, Arcadia, all the way over into Monrovia. Which makes sense right there, hovering next to the 110 freeway. And that's where, I mean, we're not too far from that. I live in Monrovia, and so we're not too far from that. This is only about 30 minutes from Studio City, so I'm sure people all the way up into Glendale saw that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Marina, and thank you, Rick Brown, for joining us. We're going to listen now. Caltech is speaking now about that earthquake. Let's listen in.
Epicenter was, or the hypocenter. So depending upon where they are sitting above it, they might feel something completely different in different places. And so they could feel different things. Every earthquake in general has a few different waves that go out. So there's the P wave and the S wave. Robert, we're already live, just so you know. And so there's a series of different waves, and the P wave can be more of a jolt that kind of comes underneath, and so you can kind of feel that shaking, the first like just jolt, and then that rolling kind of sensation is the secondary wave that comes up. It moves things kind of back and forth, so that's not uncommon at all to feel those kind of two different things. Again, the magnitude, the earthquake that just occurred in California was near downtown. It was in Highland Park, more specifically. Really close to Highland Park and kind of the South Pasadena area. It's been now that it's been reviewed by a seismologist, the magnitude is 4.4. It was originally the automatic system caught it at a magnitude 4.6, but after scientists has reviewed it, now it's been the correct value is 4.4. It was most likely on the lower Elysian Park fault. There's a 45% probability it was on that fault. This is, again, kind of an automatic system that determines this. It'll take some time to determine which fault is the actual one, but there's a number of faults kind of in the area, so it might be difficult to determine that finally. Are there any other questions? Again, we're talking about the magnitude 4.4 earthquake that just occurred a few minutes ago.
Alan, do you know there have been a number of earthquakes in that general area over the last several months? Do we have any information about whether that's on the same fault, or if is this considered an aftershock to those? What do people need to know?
So the bigger ones that have happened more recently are further away. They're not in LA. They've been to the north. There was one month or so ago near Barstow, and then another one that was just south of, right near the Grapevine, just a little bit south of Lamont. And those are further away. We wouldn't consider those is related to this earthquake at all. They would be independent. Although there are times when distant earthquakes can trigger each other. These are kind of smaller earthquakes. Usually the ones they tend to be a lot bigger if they're triggering distant earthquakes. So it's most likely not associated. It just is California is an active place with plate tectonics, and so we can get earthquakes just randomly that happen at the same time in different locations. There's a question I see in the question area here that says from Chris Adler, is it true that when we get small ones, it prevents a much larger one? That is actually not true. That's a myth. You need to have many small ones. The difference between a small one and a larger one is logarithmic. So we have a logarithmic scale. So between each magnitude level, there's 30 times the difference in energy. So if we have a magnitude 6, we need 30 of those to get to a magnitude 7, essentially, to put 30 together. So the difference is so extreme that it just doesn't add up. The big ones are just so much bigger. And so there's no way to alleviate kind of a bigger one with lots of smaller ones. Ron Lynn from the LA Times says, just is asking again to confirm what fault it was on. Right now, there's a 45% probability that it was on the lower Elysian Park fault. But there's a number of different faults in the area, and it's not clear which one it is for certain. This is still early, and this is the automatic system that determined it. It wasn't. It hasn't yet been looked at by a scientist to go back and verify. But we might not ever know exactly which one it's on, just because there are so many in the area. But so far, it looks like there's a 45% probability of that particular fault. We have Lucy excuse me, I can't speak. Lucy Jones is joining us as well. Just started answering some questions, Lucy, about the earthquake.
I see there's a question about whether other quakes have happened on this fault. What we need to understand is this area has a network of buried faults, so it's not something that shows up on the surface. The same network was involved in the 1987 Whittier Narrows quake, but exactly whether it's the same strand, because it's complicated and at depth, we'll never be able to say. But it is the same system as the Whittier Narrows. And no, this is not the Raymond Fault. The Raymond Fault is a close to vertical fault that can be mapped. It runs through San Marino High School. It runs through Raymond Hill. The Elysian Park thrust is part of the buried system that comes in very shallowly. I mean, the Raymond Fault would be like this. This is more like this, very shallow. It pushes up the hills of like the Puente Hills and Elysian Park. That's why it's got the name of the lower Elysian Park thrust. But when we've tried to image them, which is not easy, right? We have to use earthquakes and a lot of computation to try and see what the structures are in there. We see a web. We don't see one clear system. We see several different strands, and we think that they all go at different times. And we need to remember this is only a 4.5, and therefore associating it with a particular fault is always going to be problematic. And Alan, they want to confirm the size of the magnitude.
Yeah, so the initial system, the automatic system, came out with a 4.6, but after review from one of our analysts, it's actually a magnitude 4.4. So the automatic system doesn't work with as much data. It tries to get out the value as quickly as possible, and it has to pick the exact arrival time, and it might be slightly off, and so humans still come in to verify, and so that's why there's a slight difference in this case between the first value that came out and then what we find at the end.
Ron is asking me to reiterate exactly what we know about the fault systems in this region. So because of the Whittier Narrows earthquake happened in this region on a shallowly dipping fault. We had just been really starting to analyze the buried faults around LA at the time. A lot of follow-up work, mostly by A.L. Hodgson, who was just recently retired from the network, showed that there was a band. If you look at the small earthquakes, we could see a band of thrust faulting. And then when we went in and did imaging, we could see that there's sort of a stacked set of thrust faults. And so the Southern California fault model has several different faults within this area. We can't map them. They're not something that we can see. They're all buried. None of them come to the surface. And instead, on top of these faults, we're deforming the ground. And we have our series of hills that run from the Puente Hills up through Elysian Park and sort of merging into the Santa Monica Mountains. And it's had various names over the years, the Puente Hills thrust, the Elysian Park thrust. Those names are now used to differentiate between different parts of this system. And our automatic locations say, well, some probability that it's on one or on the other. It's clearly within this system. Do we have a focal mechanism that shows thrust faulting, Alan?
Yes, yeah, we do. It does thrust fault. You're right.
Right. So it's looking like the fault that produced the Whittier Narrows earthquake. And as I said, you know, it's a complicated system that doesn't match up with the surface. But this earthquake is clearly within that group. There have been others over the past. The Whittier Narrows earthquakes, 1989, we had a pair of 4.5s that were also in the system. They were just like a half hour apart. And there have been plenty of small ones over the years that are also within this. And Elizabeth Cochran with the U.S. Geological Survey is joining us now. So.
I was also asked to provide an update in Spanish. I can go ahead and do that if there was nothing else about that specifically.
Yeah, please do. Let me follow up. The point being, we can't tell a difference between the Elysian Park fault and the Puente Hills fault at this point, and whether or not it's going within that. Go ahead with the Spanish, Alan. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Gracias por estar aquí.
And you are listening to Caltech. They are now giving information in Spanish. We were getting more information about that 4.4 earthquake. It started out as a 4.6, but then was lowered to a 4.4. This is likely in the lower Elysian Park thrust line, the system. It's the same system as the Whittier Narrows earthquake back in 1987, and the pair of the 4.5 earthquakes that happened in 1989. They were just a half hour apart. We've been talking about this. This shook quite strong here in Studio City at 12:20. We felt it very strong here. We're about 14 miles away from this area where it happened, and I was talking to our meteorologist, Marina Jerica, as well. We both grew up here in Southern California and usually don't get too rattled by earthquakes, but this is one that started out with some shaking, little slow shaking. I thought maybe construction, a big truck going by, rattling things. And then I felt a stronger jolt and then a stronger rattling. And for the first time in this studio, I started to get under the desk here because that's how strong it was here. Our lights were rattling. You could hear that rumbling. It was very strong. I just received a text from a viewer, Pat Mike, who is all the way in Camarillo. She said that she felt the earthquake. It was mild there, but she definitely felt it. That, again, at least 40 to 50 from the epicenter here, which is actually southeast of Highland and Highland Park. And again, it hit at 12:20 and definitely shaking things up. We have heard that Metro will be slowing down the trains to check to make sure that there was no damage to any of the lines there for the trains. We also heard from LA County Fire. They've been checking. There are no reports of any damage. And we now have SkyCal over City Hall in Pasadena. Again, we're not hearing about any damage, no injuries, but this definitely, I mean, by no means am I a scientist, but this felt a lot stronger than a 4.4. Another one of our executive producers, Lizzie Tyler, is joining us on the phone, also in the Pasadena area. Lizzie, tell us what you were feeling out there.
Hi, Amy. Yeah, so we live in Pasadena. I have two little kids. So I was in one of the kids' room with my 4-year-old. And I mean, it was kind of like you were just describing, a big jolt. Felt like so fast, too. that it takes you a second, even though we're in earthquake country, it takes you a second to realize what it was. So it, shakes everything. Nash is freaked out, but he's actually been talking a lot about earthquakes lately because he slept through the last one. So he had told me, Mama, wake me up next time there's an earthquake. So I felt that. I said, Bud, that was an earthquake. And earthquake! So he started running. And then I have a 18-month-old, so he's little. I think it's probably the first earthquake he's felt too. So he was, Mama, he was fussing because he was a little freaked out. But yeah, I mean, it was a big jolt. And then I don't know if you've had other people discuss this on air, but I got the MyShake alert after, right? So it was seconds after, because I think we've talked about how the closer to the epicenter you are, when the last one we had, we got that, 10, 12 seconds early because we were far from the epicenter. This time, I got the alert seconds after. So that was actually kind of a confusing point for us and my family, because all of a sudden my husband's screaming, it's saying to take cover now. I'm like, no, that's the earthquake that just hit. We just now got the alert. So that made it like a little more chaotic for us, because I think once you get that alert after you felt the quake, you're thinking, well, is another one going to hit? But I realized, I was like, no, that was such a strong jolt. We must just be really near the epicenter.
Absolutely. And Lizzie, I have to ask you, when you heard that originally it was a 4.6, then downgraded to a 4.4, were you surprised at the actual size? Because did it to you feel much stronger?
Oh yeah, it felt really strong. I just think it's that thing. It feels so different. When you're used to more of that rolling sensation, when you're farther away, that's what a lot of us feel, right? Like when you're farther from an epicenter, kind of a little bit of shaking. But yeah, it definitely, felt strong. It was strong enough. My husband even said, he was like, should I look for damage? And he's walking around the house looking for damage. And I'm saying, if we have damage from a 4, we have bigger issues with this house. But yeah, it was, it reminded me a little bit. We had that South Pasadena quake. I'm trying to remember when that was. It was epicentered in South Pasadena maybe a month or two ago. And it was a similar thing. I was in South Pass at the time for church, and I mean, it was a boom. You felt the jolt, and I think it was the same thing because we were so close to epicenter. But yeah, to your point, Amy, it did. It felt big. It felt big enough that when I got the alert and I saw that number 4, I was like, oh, that felt bigger than a 4 to me.
Yeah, definitely felt bigger here, and we're at least 14 miles away, so definitely your kids will remember this one. There was no sleeping through that, I'm sure, in your household, and we're showing folks the map now with the earthquakes that we've been getting. Again, the first one happening at 12:20, and there's been some aftershocks, it appears. Perhaps in this area. We were also showing you from KCAL, folks were looking over City Hall there, checking for any damage. We see a couple of fire trucks there. At this point, we have not heard that there is damage, but they are definitely looking for some damage to see if anything has happened there. And I believe, Paul, we are going to go back to Caltech. They are zooming, giving us more information. We do see some water coming out at City Hall here. I don't know if you can, if we've heard what that is about, if there is perhaps broken water pipes or something that has happened, but we do see some water there. This is at City Hall after that 4.4 magnitude earthquake that struck just southeast of Highland Park at about 12:20 this afternoon. We see a lot of water flowing down onto the streets here at City Hall. So we will certainly see if we can get more specifics about if that is in fact some damage, maybe a water line. Still unclear about that because we have not heard about any damage yet from LA County. But because folks are in Pasadena, I'm sure people are looking, checking their homes, checking the surrounding areas to find out if there is any damage. And of course, as soon as we hear, we will bring that to you. But we want to check back in with Caltech. They are talking about this earthquake now. Let's listen in.
Right? We have a probability that it's on one, and the probability that it's on the lower Elysian thrust is slightly higher than the probability that it's on the Puente Hills. But these are buried faults. Not that accurately mapped. You've got some error bar in where this earthquake's located. And let's be honest, it's only a 4.4. It might be on a little secondary structure sitting between these two faults. Faults aren't that finely defined. No, that was awfully emphatic of me. Do one of you want to contradict me or not?
All right, Lucy, there's a question specifically from Conan Nolan. He says, Dr. Jones, where were you and what did you feel? Could you guess its size?
I was driving into the grocery store because I haven't had a chance to go shopping in quite a few days, and I felt nothing at all because I was in a moving car.
So I can add to that. I was in South Pasadena, and yes, so very close to the epicenter, and we felt a pretty sharp series of jolts here. I even had a small item just sort of tip itself off over upstairs, and so I think that's the first time we've ever had, anything other than kind of rattling in the in this location. So.
I was on the Caltech campus. It was pretty strongly felt on campus in the dining commons. It's a pretty good jolt. Nothing was knocked over, but I think almost everybody felt it.
Yeah, me too. I'm here in my office at Caltech, and it was a nice jolt. I was eating a salad and had to set it down and get under my desk. Yeah, it was a really good jolt. I was in the Mexico City earthquake in 2017, and I'll say the biggest difference was the duration. The duration of that was just a lot longer, and then like the whole building shook, and so it was a very noticeable difference immediately that this one just ended much quicker.
People are asking us about reports of damage or injuries. Remember that those don't come to the seismologists. Those go through emergency management and police departments. I have seen a report, I can't validate it, that there's somebody trapped in an elevator at Pasadena City Hall. But I don't know if that's true or not.
So we get the did you feel it reports coming in from people who experienced the shaking, and then quite a few people felt that. We have over 15,000. I don't know if this was covered before I was able to jump on. If people felt it, we do encourage them to go to the website and tell us what they felt. That helps us put together a map. I'm not seeing reports of shaking at a damaging level. It was just right at that cusp from what's come in so far.
Thank you. And we have quite a few attendees right now, so maybe someone could provide another overview of the earthquake, what time it was, where it was, the magnitude. Anyone who wants to take that, go ahead.
Sounds like a question for Alan.
I was gonna suggest actually, I can do the Spanish one and give the English one to someone else, but I can do both of that too.
Elizabeth, you can pick it up. I personally haven't had a chance to look at all the data yet.
Sure. So at about 12:20 this afternoon, we had a magnitude 4.4 earthquake located just south of Highland Park, California, in an area of Highland Park, South Pasadena, just south of Pasadena. And the earthquake was located at about 8 miles deep. As was just covered, we have a large number of felt reports up to intensity 5. That's sort of just around the level at which we might expect damage to, slight damage to perhaps begin to occur. Folks locally to the epicenter felt a series of sharp jolts. This was widely felt across the Los Angeles basin. And it was preceded by 2 earthquakes in the last day of magnitude 1.7 and 1.3.
The initial magnitude that went out was 4.7, and not uncommonly that was downgraded to a 4.4. And there's also, it's right on the border of Highland Park in South Pasadena. So the first location that went out was South Pasadena, but it's been updated to Highland Park, which is it's a community within Los Angeles.
All right, it looks like we have another question in the Q&A. I'm sorry, go ahead, Alan.
Did you want me to repeat that in Spanish first?
Oh yeah, you know what, go ahead, and we'll come back to this question.
Okay. Ese es para repetir lo que
And we've been listening to Caltech, a Zoom that they are providing for us, discussing that 4.4 earthquake that struck just about 12:20. This was southeast of Highland Park. It was 8 miles deep. We felt it here in Studio City, quite strong. This was one where I felt a little rumbling and then thinking perhaps construction, a big truck rolling by, if you've ever felt that, just a little shaking. I was kind of looking around to see if anybody else was feeling what I was feeling. Then there was a big jolt and then more shaking. So strong, in fact, that I started to get underneath the set here, under the desk, because I was thinking it was that big. And I knew immediately that it was either close or very large. And what we did hear, Caltech folks talking about this earthquake, even though it was just a 4.4, one of the folks there was in Mexico City for that huge quake that happened there some years ago. And he said that it felt the same. The only difference was that that quake lasted much longer. So that was the difference that he noticed in those two, but said that it felt the same. So definitely some extreme shaking. I have to say I was surprised that it was only a 4.4 because it felt much stronger. Growing up in Southern California, earthquakes don't usually rattle me, but I have to admit, I was a little rattled by this one, as was Marina Jericho, who also is from Southern California, has also felt plenty of earthquakes, but this was one that rattled us both, and we were both trying to figure out where we should go for safety, and that's when it stopped, and we ended up staying put. But Marina, you were completing a map showing exactly the fault lines because there was some question about which fault this was on.
Right, and they had mentioned Elysian Park thrust fault, which is about 12.4 miles long, can produce up to a 6.7 magnitude earthquake, and you can see that it is really located just to the east of 110, and I've circled this area so you can see very well here. At first we thought potentially could have been the Raymond, but she had mentioned, of course, in Caltech that the Elysian Park line, which is that dotted line that I circled there, is exactly where this is situated. So that is, you know, right on top of, going back to our earthquake map, where we could potentially have seen this earthquake occur. So right there along the 110, and you can see right there, it's where those two red dots are, is where we saw the earthquakes in the last hour, and 4.4 magnitude. But it's a pretty small area when you think about it, only 12.4 miles long, and it's a blind thrust fault. And so she talked a little bit about that, where it's like the fault plane terminates before it reaches the Earth's surface, so it's a lot deeper, and so that's why it's a little harder to pinpoint exactly which fault line this occurred on, Amy.
Joining us by the phone now is Margaret Stewart, who is with LA City Fire. Thanks so much for your patience and joining us this afternoon. What can you tell us about what's going on out there? We've been looking at a lot of images of possible damage at the City Hall buildings in Pasadena. Are you hearing about damage or any injuries?
Fortunately, in the city of Los Angeles, we have no reports of any significant damage. Now, individuals, may have things, knocked off of their shelves, but in terms of infrastructure, we are nearing the completion of what we call our earthquake mode protocol, where all 106 of our LAFD fire stations get out and do a windshield survey of their district on a pre-designated route. This is done by land, by air, and by sea. So our Marine and our Air Ops are also involved. And they're checking any of the critical infrastructure or areas of concern within their district. And then they report that up through the chain of command so that ultimately we get a very good report of the entire city, all 470 square miles. And we're nearing that completion with no reports of damage.
Which is the best news, but I have to ask you, did you feel the earthquake?
Oh, we certainly did. Our communication headquarters here, Metropolitan Fire Communications in downtown LA, is actually on a roller system for earthquake resiliency, and so we feel it even a bit more because we kind of roll with it. But we felt it, and immediately the earthquake mode was triggered, and we started that protocol.
Well, I have to say, we've been talking here in Studio City. We've all felt quite a few earthquakes in our lifetime here in Southern California, and we were all commenting that it felt a lot stronger than a 4.4. Were you surprised also that it was just a 4.4? Did it feel stronger to you as well?
Well, because I mentioned the type of construction for this building, it's a little hard for us by feel because we're on rollers, so it's a little hard to tell. So we're always looking to see, what USGS calls it, what the magnitude is. But this is a great, opportunity for people, a reminder for preparedness because, you said this is only a 4.4, and I say only, kind of in air quotes. We felt it. It could be much worse. And so knowing the safety process, drop cover, hold on to any sturdy furniture, making sure they know where their utilities are. If you're in whether it's a single family home, a condo, an apartment, do you know how to shut the gas off if that is on? Do you know how, do you have an escape plan? Where are you going to meet your family? Do you have your pets, a plan for your pets? All of these things are really important, and it's, earthquakes like this that highlight, say, okay, we got away, no damage, everyone's safe. Let's make sure that we follow back up tonight, talk to our family, and ensure that we have an escape plan. And they can find that safety information at our website, lafd.org.
Which is great advice. Thank you so much. We often also talk about the fact that you need to have a contact, someone that you can call that everyone knows in your family. If you're trying to get in touch, sometimes when you're close to the earthquake, all the phone lines will be busy. So you almost need to call someone out of state and everyone check in with that person to let the others know where you are, if you're okay, that kind of thing, because so often phone lines can get really busy. What we are showing you now on our screen is the fire department. They are checking City Hall in Pasadena, checking for damage. We did see some water coming down the building there, and they have sent crews out there to see if there is damage, perhaps a broken water line. Dr. Lucy Jones mentioned that there might have been someone stuck in an earthquake, but she could not confirm that. People oftentimes call them to give information, but that was not confirmed. I also want to mention that if you are in the Glendora area, the PD has reported that their phone lines are down. Only 911 is available, so they're asking that you please reserve 911 strictly for emergencies only. The general phone lines are down. They are working on that, and they hope to have that up soon. But again, use 911 only for extreme emergencies. Again, that's in Glendora. The PD letting us know that their phone lines are down. We've been talking to a number of people today about what they felt. A lot of them have said it was a rumbling with a big jolt. We do know that Metro did slow down their trains to check all the lines and make sure there was no damage there. We have heard back that there has been no damage and that those trains are picking back up. They're right back onto their normal speed. We have been really just trying to scour the city to find out if, in fact, there is any serious damage, any injuries that have been reported. But again, so far, we have not gotten any information of any serious damage or any injuries at this point. But again, we felt it very strong here in Studio City, about 14 miles away from the epicenter, southeast of Highland Park. I heard from one of our viewers, Pat Mike in Camarillo. She said that she felt the earthquake in Camarillo. So this was certainly felt quite some distance. And we do have some video that we're going to show you. We had on our phone one of our executive producers, Lizzie Tyler, who is in the Pasadena area. And she did send us some video of inside her house. Let's see if we can see that right now. Wow. That is intense. Wow. You know, when you see something like this and you hear 4.4, you really hope you're ready should the next be a 6.6 or anything higher than this, because We so often equate these numbers, and so often we say, oh, it was only in the 4s. Still a very strong earthquake as we are watching this video. Again, that was from one of our executive producers, Lizzie Tyler. She was at home with her 2 young boys and certainly riled up the family feeling that, and we certainly understand why. And I've been talking about when I felt the earthquake here in the studio. And again, this was the first time that I started to get underneath the desk. And my producer, I think, could see my face, and I had a little fearful look, and he was wondering what was going on. And then he felt the earthquake because our studio is filled with so many lights hanging from the rafters. I think I could hear it almost before I felt it and noticed the rumbling happening, wondering what it was, if it in fact was an earthquake. And I didn't want to say earthquake before I knew it was an earthquake. And then there was no doubt about it, because it was that initial light rumbling and then more of a jolt and a stronger rumbling. And I have to say, this one for me lasted a little longer than some of the others that I have felt in the past. And so this was one that really prompted me to want to get underneath the desk here. I know Marina was saying the same thing. It was one of those times where you're thinking this might be a really big one. And so it's time to take caution here and get under the desk. But just as I was kneeling down, that's when it stopped. And I realized, thank goodness it was over and we didn't have any damage here in the studio. But certainly one of those wake-up calls, making sure that you have all the necessary supplies that you need in your home. We're talking about cash, water, food, and also a good point of contact. A lot of times the phone lines get very busy when there is an earthquake, and you cannot reach the immediate people in your family to make sure that they're okay. So it's a good idea to have either a meeting point where you're going to go, but you can't always be sure that you're going to be able to get to that meeting point. So it's always good to have a contact person, someone that you call that is not in the area, because their lines would still be open. But here, a lot of times, the cell phone lines get really bogged down. So you want to have somebody that you can call and just check in with everybody and let everybody know that you're okay and where you're at and where you might be meeting. We are still showing you City Hall here in Pasadena. There have been a lot of crews there checking. A little earlier, we were showing you some water that was streaming down the building. We see that flow of water has stopped. We do not know for sure if this was a broken water line or what was happening to cause that water to flow down the building. But we did see that. And you can still see some of that water there on the ground, and those fire crews still there, keeping a very close eye on that building, certainly an older building, and they're hoping that there is no damage there. But again, we've been listening to lots of different folks, and joining us now on the phone is Chief Brian Selinsky from South Pasadena joining us. Chief, thank you so much for your patience and your time. What can you tell us about what's going on there in South Pasadena?
Hi, thank you. We had obviously a little bit of a jolt here. Immediately, we sent our public safety personnel out into the community to survey our critical infrastructure, look for any residential structure damage. And as of right now, we're not reporting any damage or any injuries to our residents. And we're back in business as though nothing happened.
Well, I know it's not exactly your area, but have you heard anything about City Hall? We've been showing our viewers images of this beautiful building, and there was some water spraying, just flowing down the side of the building and onto the ground. Have you heard of any damage there from your neighbors?
Only what I've seen on the news. I've talked to some of my other law enforcement colleagues in the neighboring jurisdictions, and no one else is reporting any damage. Everything seems to be working as normal. No injuries reported that I know of.
Mm-hmm. And, Chief, we often, like to talk about how it felt to us. What did you feel? Did you feel it? Can you tell us exactly what you felt?
We're in a little bit of an older building, and it's a cinder block building, so the jolt came on very quickly. It felt very short in terms of duration, but it was a hard jolt. It knocked a lot of pictures around and some down on the ground, but nothing significant. We didn't lose any roof tiles or anything of that nature.
Well, that's the best news. But, you know, I'm going to put you on the spot here, Chief, and ask, I mean, do you have an earthquake kit prepared at your home? And if you do, what do you have in it?
I do, and I would recommend that to anybody listening. You know, it's better to be prepared. I keep emergency supplies in enough for 3 days, as we all have been taught. Water, some food, first aid kit, medications that are important to me or my family. But also, one thing we don't think about is our animals and pets, food or medications for them as well. So I encourage everybody, if you haven't done it already, go online. There's some great websites from the federal authorities that can help plan a list if you're not sure what to put on there or what to put in. But I recommend putting one in your house and then, of course, one in your car as well. And if you work in an office building, it's always a great idea to have one at your desk with some extra shoes, extra clothes, just in case you need it. You never know when these things are going to happen, and we certainly don't know what exactly is going to happen. So this one very easily could have broken some windows, knocked tiles down. We're fortunate that it didn't, but it's better to be prepared.
Absolutely. Great advice, Chief. We certainly appreciate that. And we're so happy to hear that you have no reports of any damage there in South Pasadena, which is, you know, I have to say a little surprising when we've seen, we just were able to show our viewers someone's home and cameras capturing the severe jolt. And it's kind of surprising that there hasn't been any damage reported, which, of course, is great news, but certainly a little surprising to me that there hasn't been any.
Absolutely, especially in some of these older communities. I think years of preparation and some of the retrofitting that have been going on certainly has played a part in that damage reduction.
Yeah, that is true. And it's nice that people, you know, are certainly more prepared. And I love that you were able to give us all a little more advice on our earthquake preparedness kits as far as 3 days of food and water and medications for you and your pets, and having those kits at home, in your car, and at your office. And, you know, I think it's also a good reminder that, you know, sometimes we set them up and then we leave them there for years, and you do have to, you know, circulate that water out, maybe, you know, get some more food, you know, circle around and update those kits. And again, it is for you and your pets. We often talk about, you know, losing electricity for quite some time as well, and really having a plan for you and your family members so that everyone can get in touch and stay in touch and figure out if there is a meeting point. So, Chief, thank you so much for taking time to speak with us this afternoon about, you know, what you all felt and giving us all a great reminder about our safety kits this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And again, if you are just joining us, recapping the breaking news this afternoon, right about 12:20, a 4.4 earthquake struck. It was 8 miles deep, southeast of Highland Park. It has been felt all around the Southland, as well as, you know, all the way up to Camarillo. One of our viewers there said that she felt it. There has not been any reports of any serious damage. We are watching people, though, here going back into the City Hall building. It appears that they were all evacuated. We did see some water flowing. You can still see the ground wet there, because just a short time ago, we watched as water was just flowing out of that building and onto the ground. Perhaps broken water pipe there. This is certainly an older building, but these folks had been, I guess, sent out of the building as it was checked, and now they are going back in. So we believe that that is a good sign that all is well at Pasadena City Hall. We also know that Metro slowed down the trains to check the lines. There were no problems there. All the trains are flowing again right on time. We also do know that Glendora PD has said that their phone lines are currently down. 911 is still working, but they want you to only use 911 in case of a serious emergency. Because their regular phone lines are down. So only use 911 if there is a severe emergency going on. Now, we have been talking to people throughout the hour. It's been now an hour almost, about 3 minutes shy of an hour that we felt this earthquake right here in Studio City, as well as all around the Southland. And I think that, you know, we've been talking about how extreme it was, and I don't know if our crews can get that video back up. One of our executive producers, Lizzie Tyler, sent us some video from inside her home when that earthquake struck, and it really shows you the intensity of that quake. That is, you know, a very, very severe jolt that Lizzie and her family felt. She's got a couple of young sons, and everyone in the household felt this, as you can imagine, just by seeing that video. Here in our studio, we felt it quite strong. A few of us that are, you know, Southern California natives, we have felt many an earthquake in our day, and this was one of those that I have to admit rattled me and had me going to get under the desk here on the set because it was quite intense here, and we are about 14 miles away from where this earthquake was centered. There had been some questioning about if it was on which fault line, if it was on the Raymond fault, but we were hearing from Caltech that they believe it was more on the Elysian Park thrust. This is one that is, it's the same system where the Whittier Narrows earthquake happened in 1987, if you're familiar with that one. Also in 1989, there were a pair of 4.5 earthquakes. They were just about a half hour apart, also in the same system. So this is one that they are certainly familiar with, and, you know, which isn't far, again, from the Raymond fault, but not to be confused because they are going in different directions there. But again, we're happy to report that there have been no reports of any serious damage, no report of any injuries, but certainly a lot of people did feel this earthquake as it rattled right about an hour ago at 12:20. We felt it quite strong here. You may have felt it quite strong in your home, but so far, no injuries reported. So we are happy to say that. Marina Jerica is also here with me. Marina, we don't have to say who the person was, but I do know that you heard from someone that was talking about all of the shaking that was happening in Pasadena.
Yes, we actually just recently moved from Altadena to Monrovia, and my mom is at my house right now, and she said that it was shaking and all of the china and the cabinet was shaking. And like you said, Amy, we grew up with these earthquakes, and it was like just a split second. I was trying to make a decision if I needed to get under the desk or not, and I was also surprised that it was only a 4.4. But as they mentioned at Caltech, if it is a part of that Elysian Park thrust fault line, then that is a blind thrust fault, so it's super deep. So that fault plane like terminates before it reaches the Earth's surface. So that's why it's also hard for them to pinpoint it. But we did see it in that area where that fault line is, which is also a part of the Whittier fault line group. But it's about 12.4 miles long, and it's 8 miles deep. So that is why they're having difficulty pinpointing it. But I did make a graphic and I circled where exactly that Elysian Park fault line is. You can see in black. I circled it there for you. And that pinpoints exactly where we saw that at South Pasadena, Highland Park, 110 triangle, where that epicenter was located. And I know you gave all the pinpoints, but 4.4 earthquake near South Pasadena, near that Highland Park area, possibly that Elysian Park thrust fault. California gets 17 4+ quakes in an average year. So of course, as with any quake, there is a 5% chance that it is a foreshock. And so we're going to keep a close eye, of course, on this area for you for any aftershocks that do come in. But we are starting to see that As we move into the day, we'll continue to see a little bit here and there with those aftershocks that are happening right now. But I'm going to be very curious to see what fault line that ends up being. But it makes sense if it is a blind thrust fault that it's so deep that it's tough. But the destructive 1994 earthquake in Northridge was caused by a previously undiscovered blind thrust fault. So they are dangerous just because they are so deep.
Yes, and that is one of the earthquakes that really rattled me. I was all the way in Riverside on that one, and remember just the building swaying, and that was one that certainly made me, I was frightened in that one as well. This one certainly, as you mentioned, Marina, we both were thinking it was time to get under the desk, and you know, which I would not have expected that it was a 4.4. But I am hearing that we have some video inside our newsroom here in Studio City capturing the moment, and it gives you an idea of what we were feeling here in Studio City. There it is right there. You can see one of our clocks shaking there, and you know, this is you know, it's hard to really capture the feeling that you have, but I definitely felt a slow rumble where I was thinking, is a big truck going by, or is there some construction going on in the building, just kind of shaking things up a little bit. I was looking around to see if anybody else was reacting. I wasn't hearing anything from anyone. And then it was a big jolt, and then more shaking that was getting more intense. And as I'm reading the teleprompter, thinking, are we, you know, what's happening here? I need to get under this desk. And as soon as I, you know, scooted out my chair to get under there, that's when it stopped. And thank goodness, because, you know, we were hearing from the Caltech folks. One of the gentlemen with Caltech said that he was in Mexico City for that big earthquake there. And he says that it felt the same. The only difference is that quake, it kept going. It kept shaking, and that's when all that damage happened. Here, we were lucky it didn't last nearly as long. And the Caltech folks have been talking, bringing in Dr. Lucy Jones. She had something to say as well.
No, this is not the Raymond fault. The Raymond fault is a close to vertical fault that can be mapped. It runs through San Marino High School. It runs through Raymond Hill. The Elysian Park thrust is part of the buried system that comes in very shallowly. I mean, the Raymond fault would be like this. This is more like this, very shallow. It pushes up the hills of like the Puente Hills and Elysian Park. That's why it's got the name of the lower Elysian Park thrust. But when we've tried to image them, which is not easy, right? We have to do, you know, use earthquakes and a lot of computation to try and see what the structures are in there. We see a web. We don't see one clear system. We see several different strands, and we think that they all go at different times. And we need to remember this is only a 4.5, and therefore associating it with a particular fault is always going to be problematic.
And that is Dr. Lucy Jones, of course, talking about the fault lines of this earthquake. Initially, a lot of folks were thinking that it was on one fault line, the Raymond fault line, because there was a big quake there some years ago, but instead we are now hearing that it was most likely the lower Elysian Park thrust. And this is a line that has experienced other earthquakes, including 1987, the Whittier Narrows, and in 1989, there were two earthquakes. They were just half hour apart. They were both in the 4s, around the same size as this today. But again, today's earthquake, we are hearing it is now a 4.4 magnitude earthquake. Initially, this was considered a 4.6, but after more research, they downgraded it to a 4.4. It was 8 miles deep, southeast of Highland Park. And people have been feeling this all around the area. We felt it very strong here. We're about 14 miles away. Very intense here in Studio City, but we also heard from Pat Mike out in Camarillo. She felt it. People out in the Inland Empire area have felt it. It has definitely rattled a lot of us and reminded a lot of us that we need to be prepared should another big earthquake happen anytime soon or in the future, because it's not really if, it's when we will be hit by another earthquake. And, you really need to be prepared with supplies. We were listening to the chief of South Pasadena, Brian Solinsky, and he was talking about his kit in which he has 3 days of food and water and medications, not just for your family members, the two-legged ones, but also for your four-legged family members, your pets. Make sure that they have food and water and medication. You also, so many of us spend so much time in our cars with long commutes. You also want to have a kit in your car as well as in your office, because you really don't know where you're going to be when that earthquake hits. And, this serves as a great reminder. There has been no damage reported. We do know that Metro slowed their trains to check the lines. Everything is flowing fine. Everything is fine at this point. We also know that Glendora police have reported that their phone lines are down and they are only getting emergency calls to 911. If you're just calling for information, don't use the 911 line. They really are trying to reserve this just for emergencies, because their regular phone lines are down. We did hear from them. A lot of folks feeling the extreme jolt, rumbling, and this is something that's a little more common on this Elysian fault. And joining me now is my colleague, Ross Palumbo. Ross, were you in the newsroom when this happened?
Amy, I was just across the street here in Studio City, and I can tell you, I just pulled into a parking lot. And the rolling was so intense, I actually did not realize at first it was an earthquake. I thought there was something wrong with my car.
Oh, wow.
I thought the engine was seizing or doing something weird, and it went on for much longer than I've ever felt a quake for in the past.
Yes.
So that's another reason why I'm like, this couldn't possibly be a quake. I was right outside of a Trader Joe's, and you could just tell that people coming out were starting to feel it.
Oh, yes.
And it was more intense than I felt in a long time. And I immediately went to the USGS website.
Yes.
I saw that it was a 4.4. And I was surprised at how strong that felt.
Yes.
Here, we know it's centered just south of South Pasadena.
Yes. Yes.
And I know we're still looking to see if there's any damage.
Yeah. We have not gotten any reports of anything serious. We have been showing our viewers, of course, City Hall there in Pasadena. A little earlier, we did see water flowing from the side of the building. We never quite heard what that was. They also, it appeared to be that they evacuated the building because we saw quite a few people outside, and then we saw them all being ushered back in just about 10, 15 minutes ago. But as you were saying, Ross, I was up here anchoring. We were just getting ready to go to a commercial. I was reading the prompter, felt that first rumbling, thought maybe it was a large truck, in the parking lot, just kind of that light rumbling. And I was looking around thinking, is anybody else feeling what I'm feeling right now? Then there was a strong jolt and then more intense rumbling. And I was just pushing back my chair to get underneath the set, under the desk here, when it all stopped. And, I don't get rattled easily by earthquakes because I did grow up here in Southern California. I felt many of them, and they usually don't faze me. But this one, I have to say, I was clearly rattled. I mean, in more ways than one. I was a little rattled. It did, it startled me a bit because I was thinking, what do I do? I need to be here to give information, but I also want to get under the desk and be safe. So let's just be clear.
Yes,
I would have given that information to you from underneath the desk if that was the case, but I'm happy to report.
We've done it before.
Yes.
We've done it before. And
no
I think
injuries here. They did feel it in the newsroom. We did show folks that a clock shaking in our newsroom because we were definitely feeling it there.
Well, Amy, I think the thought for all of us was that it got more intense. It went on a long time, and then it really felt like something right at the end. And I could tell by the stunned look on people's faces in the parking lot and coming out of the stores that they felt it too. But fortunately, where we were, no damage and no serious damage reported throughout Southern California that we've seen yet throughout the LA metro area. And as we look at these images here, we can tell that people are looking and checking over an abundance of concern. But fortunately, a little bit of a scare and no serious damage.
Yes, what we have just learned, Ross, because what we saw a little earlier was water flowing from the building, and I'm just getting word now there was a pipe that burst in City Hall. They are working on repairing it now. We did see that water, and that does make sense. We thought perhaps there was a broken pipe there. You know, these are older buildings, and it was quite the shake here, so I can only imagine there the intensity of this earthquake. But again, that is the only damage that has been reported from the fire department there, that one broken water pipe. And they, of course, evacuated the building just to make sure. They went through checking the entire City Hall building there, and that is the only thing that has been reported. We have talked to the chief of South Pasadena. No damage reported there. And again, you know, we have seen video of shaking, but fortunately, no damage reported, which is really the best news, because this was quite the shake here in Studio City. You can only imagine if you were in Pasadena what you were dealing with.
Well, exactly. I mean, we're still a few miles.
Yeah, about 14
yeah,
from where it
14
happened.
miles away. And I think the headline so far is really a scare because the length of it. It really did go on a long time, and perhaps, you know, we'll have to check in with officials from USGS, but I always wonder whether when it's longer, if that means the quake has dissipated a little. If it's better for us if it's a longer, lower magnitude versus a sharp jolt.
Yeah, this was that sharp jolt, and the folks at Caltech, they were talking to us, and one of the men who was working there and talking says that he was in Mexico City for the quake there, and he says it felt the same to him. The only difference was that in Mexico City, it kept going, and here it stopped sooner. But you can only imagine if that shaking kept going, there would definitely have been some damage around here, because, you know, things can only shake so long until they start to fall and, you know, come crashing down. So we're glad that it didn't last any longer. But as you mentioned, Ross, it definitely was enough to really shake us up a bit and startle some of us.
You know, and here at City Hall, the news of the pipe breaking, it's such a reminder to all of us that even after a quake, even after you don't see any physical damage, you still want to make sure at your own home, for instance, that there is no problem with the pipes or the water heater or any gas intakes. That's what I always look for. We know that in my home, in many homes across Southern California, all these things are braced as much as possible, but you just never know when something aging has a problem, and then something like here at City Hall just springs up.
Exactly. And it is great news that so far there has been nothing, but certainly a great reminder for folks, Ross, that they need to check around their homes, especially if you live in these areas where they really got a good jolt. We had seen some video. One of our executive producers, Lizzie Tyler, sent us some of her video, and you could really see the intensity of this earthquake. Here it is right here, Ross. You can just see that. Look at that shake. I mean,
wow.
That's
pretty much what we felt.
Yes.
Right? And it's interesting
exactly.
because you never know really how much the camera itself is. Clearly, the camera itself is bouncing, making this look even more dramatic. But the most telling thing is everything on the shelves.
Yes, you can see
I
some
mean,
of it.
and there's a dog.
There.
You see, is that a mirror or a pass-through there? You see the dog?
Oh, yeah, I see the tail.
Yeah,
I think
and
that might be a mirror. Oh,
yeah, and you know, I have to tell you, that's where my thoughts go immediately. My dog home alone between walks, wondering how is he? And of course, they're terrified. It's always good to check in. I checked it on my camera. You should always check in on your camera.
Did you notice anything on your camera?
No.
Okay.
Fortunately,
Okay,
because it's
which is
hard
great.
to see.
It is hard to see, but we do know. We heard from a viewer, Pat Mike, who's out in Camarillo, and she did feel the earthquake as well, and that's quite some distance from Pasadena. But she says that she felt it. It was mild, but she did feel it. A lot of folks felt this one, and certainly felt that rattle. I do want to let our viewers know that we are going to be getting another update from Caltech. They spoke with us a little earlier. We were listening in on a Zoom that they provided, and they'll be doing that again at 1:45, and we will listen to see if there are any more updates, because there was some question about where this was. Initially, some folks thought that this was on the Raymond Fault, but in fact, it is on the Lower Elysian Park Thrust, which is an area that has seen its share of earthquakes. In 1987, it was the same system for the Whittier Narrows earthquake. And then in 1989, there were a pair of earthquakes just half hour apart. So they are familiar with this fault line, but certainly the information's coming in. They're still getting updates. And this one right now, what we do know is it was 8 miles deep. And so it'll be interesting to hear about their updates. But initially, this one was 4.6, and then it was lowered to 4.4. And I have to say, I was certainly surprised, because I thought the news would be much bigger than 4.4.
You know, it's interesting because it was downgraded. And I think when I initially saw the data on the website, I think it said 12 miles. So it's so interesting how these numbers get updated. We are getting a lot of information from people that felt it. And of course, so many people felt this one particularly because this was centered in such a populated area. I mean, it's right really in the center of the metro area. And so many people saw it. If you did see it or feel it, or you caught it on your webcam or your home security cam, please send it into us here so we can take a look at exactly what you saw from your perspective. But again, aside from a water pipe breaking here at City Hall, no reports yet of any serious damage, but it does bear repeating. We can't say it often enough. Please check your home or wherever you are just to make absolutely certain something's not happening in or around your house that you're not aware of yet. Sometimes in these smaller quakes, things happen that you might not notice. It could be, I've had at my home, a sprinkler valve break. And that's a slow leak, and it can cause a lot of damage if it's not caught.
Absolutely, absolutely. We also want to mention that Pasadena Unified Schools, they have not started until August 19th, so those kids weren't in class, but there were some teachers and staff that were on campus, preparing for the upcoming school year, and those buildings were evacuated, and they have all been checked and declared safe. The staff has been given the all clear to go back in, but which again is great news that no damage there either. And certainly that is very close to that southeast area of Highland Park where this earthquake was centered. And we're continuing to show you City Hall in Pasadena. We do know that there was a broken water pipe there that they are repairing. The building was evacuated. And firefighters were there checking throughout the building. As Ross was saying, it's so important to check to make sure that there is no damage, gas lines, water lines. And so we do know that there was a very visible water pipe that burst, but no other damage was reported. And so all those folks were able to go back into the building.
We are just receiving some information that LAUSD Superintendent Carvalho is going to be holding a press conference at 2:30 at Venice High School to talk about this earthquake, because as we all know, school just returned. This is the first day, and we know how prepared LAUSD is for earthquakes. We've all gone through the drills and the learning to make sure our children are safe. We have not heard any reports of serious damage coming from the district or from the superintendent, but I imagine that this press conference at 2:30 will really be to assure parents that everyone is safe and sound. But it is a breaking story, and we're still waiting for the full report. So we don't have the all clear yet from LAUSD, but at this point, we do believe no serious damage to any of our schools.
Which is true. And, so many of us who grew up here grew up with those earthquake drills of, duck and cover. And that is what I was going to do. Now, in the early days, not to date myself too much, we used to also hear to stand in a doorway. That is not recommended any longer. You always want to get under a strong piece of furniture, your dining room table, a desk, anything that will protect you from things falling from your ceiling, whether it be lights, or anything coming crashing down, that a desk or a big table will certainly give you some protection. Here in the studio, Ross, I have to tell you, when it struck here, all of the lights were rattling. Of course, these are, double and triple, secured here. And we did have the engineers come in. They were looking around, making sure everything was safe here in the studio. But they were definitely rattling. You could hear them, you could see them. And that was definitely the sign that I knew that it was truly an earthquake and not a large truck going by the studio here near me.
And part of the planning here is that they do move a little bit, right? So things don't break off. So it is always the telltale sign when you see things moving and shaking. But here in Southern California, we are prepared and used to it. In fact, here on the USGS website, I see that since the Highland Park quake happened at 12:20 today, we've had 3 more, one in Baja California, all 3 nothing too significant, but that's the closest one to us that has happened. Just another reminder of how often these happen. We always believe that the frequency is better if they're small and spread out rather than that pressure building up, and it looks like that may be the case in what happened here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, we are waiting for an update, another update from Caltech about this 4.4 earthquake that struck at 12:20 this afternoon. It was 8 miles deep southeast of Highland Park near Pasadena, and plenty of folks felt it all around us, including right here in Studio City. Want to remind everyone that the Metro did check all of their train lines. Trains were slow temporarily, but they are back up to normal speed after finding no damage there. And Pasadena schools also not in session yet, but they have checked the buildings. Those are fine. And we also know that Glendora PD, again, we've been mentioning this, their phone lines are down. And 911 is available, but they are urging you only to use 911 for a real emergency. Don't call to ask questions on the 911 line.
We were just talking about LAUSD. We have Pasadena High School. KCAL is over right now, and clearly we don't see any problems, but our assignment desk right now is checking to make sure that there was no issue there. But, the good news is here, the parking lot is relatively empty. It looks like there's no one out there, and if there were a problem, we would see emergency vehicles. But this is just part of our protocol to fly from site to site and check and see what we can see from the air. And frankly, the less we see, the better, always in a situation like this.
Absolutely. It was the first day for LAUSD, but Pasadena Unified Schools, they don't start until August 19th. So they've got a little more summer left, but there were some staff members, teachers, preparing their classrooms, getting ready for the big day that is, right around the corner next week. And so they were there. They did evacuate, and all of the buildings have been checked, and there are no reports of any damage there at Pasadena Unified Schools, which is great news because, next week they'll be there.
Yeah, it's much better to have the skeleton crew there
exactly.
looking and making sure that everything's okay, making sure we don't have a problem inside the structure of any of these facilities, which is perhaps the most likely outcome at this time. Minor damage, something minor that could, if unnoticed, perhaps balloon into a problem.
Absolutely. Now, we do know that Caltech was planning to do an update for us at 1:45. Paul, is that still happening?
And as we wait here,
are we going to take that now? Okay, let's listen into Caltech as they give us another update about this 4.4 earthquake that struck at 12:20 this afternoon. Okay, well, they were doing a Zoom for us right away and giving us an update about this earthquake, all right? And there is a team there that, of course, kind enough to give us all updates about that. They are getting everything in place to continue on with this. And it really is great that they can do these Zooms so everyone can listen in and get the latest information about what
All
is
right,
happening.
looks like we have Sue Huff and Gabrielle Tapp. Sue and Gabrielle, if you are there, it looks like we don't have Alan right now and we don't have Lucy right now. So to get started, could one of you provide a quick overview of today's earthquake, just basic information about where it was, what time it was, and the magnitude?
Sure. I can do it if you want. I don't
Yeah,
see
if you could,
Gabrielle.
Sue, if you just go ahead and introduce yourself and give your title and then give the quick overview, and then we can take some of these questions we received during the break.
Okay, so my name is Susan Huff, Hough. I'm a seismologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Pasadena. So around 12:20 local time, we had a magnitude 4.4 earthquake that was in the Highland Park region of Los Angeles, close to South Pasadena. It's not clear which fault it was on. There's complicated faulting in that area. It was widely felt. There were 15,000 reports that came in from the Did You Feel It system and counting. Shake Alert was activated. I don't have the details on that performance yet. There's going to be a lot of data to look at. There were a couple of events in this immediate area going back to June. On June, I'm sorry, just disappeared. I think it was June 2nd. There was a magnitude 3.4 in a very similar location that was felt. This one is bigger. There, at magnitude 4.4, we expect aftershocks. They may be a few that are big enough to be felt. Any earthquake in California, there's about a 1 in 20 chance of something bigger happening within the next few days. If something bigger were to happen, it would likely be only slightly bigger than the 4.4. And
thank you, Sue. And then we can get to some of these questions. We have Ron Lynn from the LA Times asking, what is the maximum intensity of the felt shaking of this earthquake? The shake map says 4.5. Does that mean the maximum intensity felt of shaking is level 4 or light shaking or level 5 moderate shaking?
yeah, that's a good question, and it's confusing because we're talking about the intensity scale, which is separate from the magnitude. The magnitude was 4.4, but the shaking intensity is how strong it was in any location, and I know some folks are very familiar with that, but we do get, let me just check real fast. It was about 15,000 reports. Now it's up to 20,000, and they're still coming in of people who fill out a questionnaire. The strongest shaking reports that have come in so far are what we call intensity 5. It's just barely strong enough to maybe knock a few small objects off of desks, that kind of shaking. It's not strong enough to cause damage. But so the shaking that was experienced was at worst strong enough to knock a few things off of shelves.
Thank you for that answer. We have a question from Eric Brenner from Breaking Los Angeles News, who says, everyone is talking right now about the 5% chance of a larger earthquake occurring. Statistically speaking, has the 5% now gone up? How big is that 5% at this moment? We have a few questions here. And the last part of his question is, why did people, particularly in Studio City and East Hollywood, feel it so strongly? So you can answer that in whatever order makes sense to you.
Yeah, so that foreshock probability, it's always around 1 in 20. The odds are highest right after the earthquake happens. So the more time goes by without something happening, that number drops. So it's actually lower than it was, let's see, an hour and a half ago. For what that's worth, there should be some numbers put out by now, an operational aftershock forecast. I have not seen that yet. But it's so 5%, it's 1 in 20, which means it won't happen. But that's the odds have gone up from what they were 2 hours ago. So it's a good time for people to be on their toes and to think about preparedness and what they would want to do, if a bigger earthquake strikes. What would you wish you had done before? And so let's see, the other question was the pattern of shaking. That always depends on a couple things. First of all, location. but also which way does the fault break? And if it breaks and is coming at you, you can get a little bit stronger shaking because of that, like adopted fact. If you're sitting on a certain kind of rock that shakes more, you can get more shaking there. That I have seen, the strongest shaking is very close to the epicenter, and then just a little bit to the southwest. And that possibly could reflect the way the fault broke, but we have to look at the data.
All right, you're
All right,
listening
and then we have
to
one last
Susan
question
Huff
from
give us
Jacob
the very
Margolis
latest
from
on the
KCAL.
earthquake. We've learned that they don't know exactly which
asks-
fault line this was along. Still a 4.4 magnitude. Most surprisingly, she says the shaking intensity from 20,000 reports coming in, substantial, at about a 5 right now. And we certainly know that we have felt that right here in Studio City. And if you're just joining us, this is the 1220 earthquake that hit precisely centered at North Huntington Drive and Northeastern Avenue, just south of South Pasadena. No reports of any serious damage or injuries.
That's right. And our Nicole Comstock has arrived at City Hall in Pasadena. We were showing City Hall a little earlier, Nicole, as we watched people be evacuated and go back in. What are you hearing and seeing there now?
Well, I just spoke with the spokesperson for the city of Pasadena a couple of minutes ago, and we'll bring her in just a few seconds here. But she tells me that they did have damage to a water pipe here, which is that water you saw coming from the top of the building here at City Hall. And basically, they've had inspectors going around the building, making sure everything has been okay since then. They also had that fire alarm go off when the earthquake jolted everyone awake out here in Pasadena. And they had an elevator get stuck in the building as well. So they had multiple situations they were dealing with. Thankfully, it sounds like everyone's okay, but we're going to bring in Lisa Derdarian, the spokesperson with the city of Pasadena right now. How's the building looking? I know we have it taped off here. We've had inspectors going around. For the most part, everything's looking okay, right?
Right. Things have settled down. We did quickly get the staff member out of the elevator, and we did shut off the water to that burst pipe. That took a while, but as a result, it set off the fire alarms. Hence, several hundred employees evacuated across the street per protocol until we were able to get them back in their office space.
That must have been scary for everyone, because you feel these earthquakes and you're like, pretty strong, but do we need to run to safety? Like, how bad is this going to get? And you can imagine having all of those people having the same thought at the same time.
Right, and we want people to drop, cover, hold on. First day of school for PUSD, so we're hoping that the teachers talk to the students, especially little ones, about not getting up, running. When they go home tonight, reinstill that with the parents, that what to do when an earthquake happens. Talk about your communications plan, make sure your batteries are working, phones are charged, sturdy shoes next to your bed, and have extra supplies for your furry friends.
Explain to us what happened when we had this water pipe burst up here, because we had our helicopter over and we can see water coming out of one of those pipes and into the drainage around the building here.
Right, so due to the shaking, it burst a pipe. Even though the City Hall was retrofitted for earthquake standards in 2007, it did cause the pipe to burst a significant amount of water. Our fire department was able to shut it down, but the water saturation sets off the fire alarm, which signals for people to leave, not knowing if it's a fire or not. So they safely evacuated. We did respond to a smell of gasoline that was unfounded in the city, but other than that, we're very fortunate, no other significant issues. Again, people may get home tonight and see that they have damage. And we know that an engineer is going over to the Rose Bowl Stadium to inspect that too. We're fortunate to have a very historic architecture in Pasadena, but with that comes maybe superficial damage. So we want to ensure that all of our buildings are safe to occupy.
Yeah, that's a good point. All these beautiful historic buildings here, including the Central Library, which right now is in the process of getting ready for this earthquake retrofit as well, right?
Correct. That library has been shut down due to retrofitting. We have not gone inside there yet because our priority is inspecting our districts, but that's the main reason why we do have it shut down. It doesn't meet the earthquake standards.
Were you in City Hall when this earthquake hit?
I was actually in a restaurant with several hundred people, and when the shaking started and then a huge jolt, everybody shut down. It was silent, and then everybody kind of resumed back to their eating habits as I got up and left. But we want people not to be scared, but prepared, and today's a reminder to do that. So we're hoping people go home tonight, have those discussions. We're lucky things have settled down, but more than likely there will be aftershocks.
It feels like there's much more of an intensity with this earthquake, too, since we had that one last week. So everyone's nerves are already kind of heightened right now.
Right. And the last two that we felt locally, the 5.0 and greater in the last few weeks, we're not close to Pasadena. The one today, pretty close, within probably 6 miles of us, if not closer, at a different fault line. And that's why, I'm thinking that there will be the aftershocks. People need to be prepared, not just for the big shake, but what we may have coming up. And again, a reminder with school in session, vacations ending, sit down, have that family conversation and get prepared.
Are you hearing about any damage from like anyone's residences, homes, any other damage in the city?
No, not that we're aware of. Slight land movement, they're saying it one of our, in the Arroyo, what we call it, the Arroyo area of Pasadena, but that's common in this type of situation. If people get home, they have damage, do not go inside. If you see that you have significant damage, definitely call us. We'll come out and inspect that. I think if we would have had any additional elevator issues, we would have been aware of it by now. But we're lucky, just the one issue at City Hall, and that staff member was quickly removed from the elevator safely.
That last question for you, did the elevator just kind of shut down because it was triggered by the earthquake? Does it naturally just kind of do that, or?
That's what we're not aware of. So we do have the elevator company coming out, hence no elevator use at City Hall for the time being. We do have 3 floors of staff that occupy office space. So if we do need to make accommodations for them, we will. But for now, the elevators at City Hall are not in working condition until inspected.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Lisa. I appreciate it. And a hot day out here, too, I should add, for everybody to be running around and inspecting pipes out here and trying to get people out of elevators. You can imagine if you felt that big jolt and then you couldn't open the doors on an elevator, you were probably pretty scared for a little while. But thankfully, that person was able to make it to safety. Again, Pasadena City Hall saying they had a pipe burst due to the force of this earthquake. It was pretty strong here. They had some water leaking out of that pipe. They seem to have gotten that under control, and they're just going around all of their, mostly the historic buildings probably to start with here in Pasadena that might be the most vulnerable to earthquake damage, making sure no one's hurt, making sure they don't have any major structural issues. But I was in Pasadena when this earthquake happened. I happened to be outside at the time. For me, it just felt like one really big, strong jolt. Couldn't really tell. It almost felt like if there was a car crash behind me that hit a pole, it felt like it kind of like popped the ground up underneath me where I was standing outside. But I know for people that were inside buildings, it definitely feels more intense than that because you can hear all of the building material shaking. You can probably see the walls moving. So I think it depends on where exactly you're at when you feel the earthquake. In addition to just how close you are to the epicenter of how scary it was, and if you saw anything moving or if you felt like you actually needed to get up and get out of your house or, get to a safer location, get under a table, whatever it may be. But, when I was outside, another person came who was in maybe 5-story apartment building that she said, I'm from New York and I'm not used to this kind of shaking. So I didn't know what to do. I ran out with my cat. And she was surprised that none of her other neighbors, who are probably from Southern California, weren't running outside because most people kind of felt the jolt, felt like everything was settled, and then maybe resumed their business, maybe turned on the news to see how big it was and where it was centered. But looks like for the most part, everything's okay out here. Just, pretty startling for most people to be that close to it, you guys.
It was, Nicole, and I understand why that person ran out of the building. Here in the studio, growing up in Southern California, I have felt many an earthquake, but this was the first time that I actually was starting to get underneath the desk here on the set because it was that intense and it was lasting longer than normal as well.
Yeah, Nicole, what were people around City Hall, those who had to be evacuated? Did you have a moment, I know you were citing it very quickly for us, did you have a moment to speak with any of them? When the fire alarms go off, when you see the water, when people are running out of the building, there is a moment there, right?
Yeah, we didn't have a chance to speak with any of those people that were evacuated yet because the spokesperson told us they were able to go back inside and get to work. Oh. But I'm sure it was scary for them. I mean, not only do you feel the shaking, but you have the fire alarm going off, which is going to freak you out. You see water coming out of the building. You're probably like, oh man, is there damage in here? We need to be worried about. You're probably thinking this is an old building. I want to stay away from it for a little bit just to be safe. But I was definitely hearing just in the neighborhood I was in that they definitely thought this was one of the biggest ones they felt in recent times in this area where people were actually startled by it and kind of didn't know what to do and then had to remember again, do I get in a door frame? Do I get under a table when this happens? Is it best to get outside? So I think you're kind of reminded of those things when you have another one of these big earthquakes that takes you by surprise.
And it's always good, Nicole, as you know, and Amy, we all know that at least if we can have a little smile on our face and all the craziness that ensued, that means that it all went pretty well, right? You know, the spokesperson did say that they're thinking about a possible aftershock, and of course Caltech saying that there's really only a 1 in 20 chance, Amy, of that possibly happening. And as we get farther from the incident 1220, so we're about an hour and 40 minutes away, the likelihood is decreasing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, 1 in 20. And Caltech was also talking about the shaking. You know, it's not just the magnitude, it is the shaking intensity. And they heard from plenty of folks that this was an intensity level 5, which means it's strong enough to knock things off shelves, but not really to break things. So a lot of people may have things that have fallen over. We did see, though, you know, that broken water pipe there at City Hall, and this is a building that was retrofitted back in 2007. So it was still enough to break a water pipe. So it was definitely a good shaker.
And we've all felt it. I mean, Caltech was telling us 20,000 reports coming in from people about the intensity. Let's resume the briefing right now from Caltech and get the very latest.
See, Lucy or Gabrielle, would either of you be able to provide another quick overview of today's quake for folks that have joined since our earlier iteration of this press conference?
I can pick it up. We did have a magnitude 4.4 earthquake today at 12:20 this afternoon. It was located 5 kilometers or 3 miles southeast of Highland Park, which puts it just west of southwest of South Pasadena, an area with very high density of people. It was felt by very many people across the region. So far, the U.S. Geological Survey's Did You Feel It system that tells, that where you can report your responses is reporting 20,000 entries that have been put in, though it looks like it hasn't been updated so there may very well be more than that. It hasn't been updated really recently. So it's the sort of earthquake that happens here in Southern California at various intervals, but the largest, probably the strongest shaking we felt in at least East LA area, the eastern part of the Los Angeles basin, in quite a few years.
All right, thank you. Members of the media, if you have any other questions, please go ahead and post them in the Q&A. It looks like we're coming up on about 20 minutes for this second segment. Lucy, Gabrielle, Elizabeth, how do you feel about keeping this open? I think we've had this open for about an hour in total now. Do you feel like we have any other questions we need to answer or topics to discuss?
Well, I do see a new question coming in from Ron Lynn that is the one that is near and dear to my heart, which is what's going on about earthquake retrofitting. And I think this is a really important point. We have types of buildings that we know are very dangerous and that will kill people, and that knowledge does not make the building disappear. So we have seen a variety of retrofitting ordinances around California, probably more in Los Angeles County than any other area of the state. The worst type of building is what's called a unreinforced masonry building. Los Angeles passed mandatory retrofit of that type of building back in 1980. So there were none unretrofitted left in the 1994 Northridge earthquake. And in fact, and nobody died in a URM in that earthquake, which was unique for the size in California at that point. The majority of California cities have mandatory retrofit. About half of California cities have mandatory retrofit. The majority by far in Los Angeles County have mandatory retrofit ordinances. But since then, we've also discovered, really been able to show that there are 2 other types of buildings that are particularly dangerous. One of them are called soft first story buildings, which are multi-story buildings where the first floor has some sort of big opening, like it's a carport area that leaves, that forms a stress concentrator. So when the earthquake hits and shakes this, the stress gets concentrated in that weak floor, and then you get a collapse of the first floor. It's what killed people in the Northridge Meadows apartment structure in the Northridge earthquake, and left 49,000 housing units uninhabitable after Northridge because of how common that type of structure is in the apartment buildings of Southern California. Los Angeles has completed almost completed its retrofit of those buildings. There are another half a dozen cities, including Pasadena, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, that have already enacted their retrofit legislation. Burbank and Long Beach are also working on it at this point. Santa Monica has also completed their retrofit program, but that's only a half a dozen cities. And the majority of the other cities in Southern California have not adopted any of these, in the ones in Los Angeles County. And this is something that not only kills people, as we saw in '94, but it also leaves people homeless. And we have enough of a homeless problem already. I would strongly encourage anybody listening to this that has an influence on this to look at getting more of those sort of buildings retrofitted, because we can't afford to lose that housing when a bigger earthquake comes through. The most dangerous type of buildings are what are called non-ductile concrete buildings. Los Angeles is in the middle of a retrofitting program passed in 2015, but they have 25 years to complete the process. And Santa Monica has also, and I think Beverly Hills has passed non-ductile concrete. I'm not sure about Beverly Hills, but it's much more limited because that type of retrofitting is more expensive and therefore hasn't been undertaken. But, this was a small earthquake. There will be earthquakes that damage these types of buildings in the future. And I hope this is a wake-up call to people who have an influence on making these decisions. I will add one further comment. All of our modern building codes, they aren't going to kill you, but that doesn't mean the building's going to be okay. We also have an issue that we build buildings to solely not collapse. And that means we accept complete financial loss of buildings, which is expected to be pretty widespread when we have our big earthquakes, because nobody builds more than the minimum standard in general. And we've advocated for increasing the minimum standard, which would add about 1% to the cost of construction and would save a lot of money in the long run. But so far, that hasn't happened.
All right, thank you, Lucy. I don't see any additional questions, so unless anyone else has any objections, I think we can probably go ahead and end this press conference. How are you feeling, Lucy?
You've been listening to this briefing from Caltech, and one of the more interesting things, Amy, that we just heard is that this 4.4 relatively small quake just south of South Pasadena in Huntington Park, that this was actually the strongest quake that East LA has felt in a number of years.
We often think, the magnitude, but a lot of times it's more about the intensity. This was 8 miles below, and it was one of the stronger quakes that I have felt in a very long time, prompting me to get under the desk. I was just on my way to get under the desk here live on air when the shaking finally stopped. Again, it was at 12:20 this afternoon, being called just a 4.4, still very intense. And again, we've had no reports of any injuries, some minor damage. That water pipe broke there at Pasadena City Hall. Crews are there. They did a check of the building. There was one person, a staff member, that was stuck in an elevator. Everyone was evacuated from the building. They were able to get that staff member out safe and sound. Crews are working on that water pipe to fix that, but we haven't had much more. This is when it was happening there. Soon after, we saw that water flowing down the building, and we thought perhaps it was a broken pipe, but this is a building that was retrofitted back in 2007.
Right, and as you just heard seismologist Lucy Jones tell us, just because buildings have been retrofitted, just because our building codes now require earthquake standards, that doesn't mean that everyone is going and everything is going to be okay. It really means that the building will not collapse. That doesn't mean that furniture could not fall on you, or mirrors, or glass, or someone could be injured, or pipes can break. And it's always good to reflect on these things, especially when we have a medium to minor quake like this with no injuries, to think about the future. And that's really what she was urging, to remember. This is another reminder that we need to do more to make sure our buildings are safe and everyone is okay. Looking at City Hall, the fire alarm going off, the water coming down, someone trapped in an elevator briefly. Those are terrifying moments, but fortunately no one hurt in that situation.
Absolutely, and we did hear from one of our executive producers who was in Pasadena that said that she got the shake alert, but I think because she was so close, it didn't happen before the shaking. It was happening right after the shaking, and I did not get an alert here. This is video from Lizzie's home there in Pasadena. You can see the intensity of that 4.4 quake, again 8 miles below, happening at 12:20 this afternoon. And it really is a good reminder for all of us to make sure that we are prepared should a bigger quake happen. Make sure that you have food, water, and medications for 3 days. You also want to have a plan with your family, because so often when an earthquake happens here, the phone lines get jammed up and they're busy. So you almost need to find someone who lives out of state, and everybody knows that's the person that you call, and that person will get all the information, where all the family members are, if everybody's okay, and use that. And also remember to have cash, because power can go up for days. There's no ATMs, there's only cash.
And in that video, we just want to keep pointing out that you can see Lizzie's beautiful dog and the mirror. I believe that was a mirror back there. Always checking on your pets and your loved ones. Many people did feel this. I was in a car in a parking lot. I felt it. I actually thought it was my engine because it was so intense, and it just went on and on much longer than I've experienced in a very, very long time. People were coming out of the grocery store I was near with that look of what is happening. We all know that look.
Oh, yes.
We saw it throughout the newsroom. Earlier, we showed you our station clock as it was shaking and rattling. I know here you were saying, Amy, that the lights were shaking here in the studio. At 20,000 reports coming in at the USGS from their Did You Feel It system, and that bringing the shaking intensity, keeping that at around a 5, because so many people felt it, because this happened in such a densely populated area. Again, it's really the largest shake that East LA has felt in years.
Yes, we did hear from one of our viewers, Pat Mike, out in Camarillo. She said that she felt it. It was mild, but she did feel it. And, we're about 14 miles away from the epicenter of this earthquake, just southeast of Highland Park. And we felt it strong. And as you were talking about it, Ross, it went on for longer than normal. I first thought, sitting here doing the news for the noon hour, KCAL News at noon, I felt a little rumbling, a little shaking. I thought perhaps it was a large truck going by. That's kind of that same feeling of just kind of like a little shaking, a little vibration there. And I kind of looked around wondering. I just kept reading what was on the prompter at that time. Then I felt that strong jolt. And then I thought, oh, this is definitely an earthquake. And that's when the shaking continued. It was very intense, and I was starting to get under the desk here when it all stopped, and definitely rattled me. Growing up here in Southern California, I don't often get rattled by these earthquakes. They usually come and go, and you keep on moving. But this time was the first time I thought, I need to get under a desk. And that is what, a lot of people were thinking, and it is a great reminder. In the old days, some of us used to hear that you get under a door frame. We do not do that anymore. You want to get under a desk, under a large table, something that can protect you from falling debris, falling lights, fans, anything that might come down.
And in school, you go through these drills.
Yes.
And today, coincidentally, was the first day at LAUSD. Superintendent Alberto Carvalho has reached out to us and told us that there will be a briefing to update us all on how the school facilities and the students did during the quake. That's coming up in exactly 15 minutes. So, of course, we'll get you all the information we have on that. But rest assured, we have not heard of any damage to any school in the LAUSD system, and certainly no reports yet of any injuries to anyone or students.
Yes, and also Pasadena Unified, of course, their school doesn't start until the 19th, but there were some faculty and staff there on some of the campuses. They were all evacuated, buildings were checked, everything is fine, and no reports of any damage or injuries for the kids will be starting on the 19th, so next week, and all of those buildings are free of any damage, which is the best news.
Yes.
Metro also slowing down trains, make sure that the lines were all good. No problems with the train. We did know that Glendora PD reported that their phone lines were down, their general lines. 911 was still up and running, but they were encouraging people not to use 911 only for an emergency. You were not to call 911 for questions or information. Save that only for emergencies. So that was really the only thing. And of course, that broken water pipe at City Hall that we saw, and the person that was stuck in the elevator. But again, person was out. Crews are repairing that water pipe now.
Yeah, and all of this happening as other news has been developing throughout the day. LA Mayor Karen Bass, who is on her way back from Paris. Actually, we're doing the transfer of the flag, the torch, as we prepare for LA 2028, the Olympics here. And there's a lot of concern, of course, at the airport as they were coming in, because there's going to be a substantial event happening there. The mayor's plane has landed, by the way, but she has not come off yet.
She has not come off, but she will have the flag. And I was reading somewhere that she is the first Black mayor to actually have the Olympic flag. So very exciting. But we are getting, image now. This is a live look from KCAL of that plane. The mayor has landed, and she does have that Olympic flag. That, you know, it really is a symbolic passing of the torch, passing of the flag, because we will have the Olympics in 2028 for the Summer Games.
And all the excitement, of course, is already building. We've been preparing for more than a year here. We've had security already putting plans in place. We know that LASD, LAPD, they were both in Paris looking at the security system there to see what they could learn about what we're going to do here. Of course, this is not our first go-around at the Olympics. More on that throughout the day. Back to the coverage of the quake right now. This 4.4 magnitude quake happening just southeast of Highland Park. If you're just joining us, it was centered more precisely around North Huntington Drive and Northeastern Avenue. The magnitude was originally sent out as a 4.6, but it was downgraded to a 4.4. We know that it was 8 miles deep. The shock intensity of 5. So many people feeling this, and we keep saying this because the number is high for this situation. 20,000 people already on USGS. Amy saying they felt it, and we know we felt it here. I felt it in a parking lot, in my car, shocks and all, still felt it. The car moving and swaying so much I thought something was going on with my engine. You felt it here in the studio.
Oh, yes, very intensely. And, you know, Caltech has had a couple of briefings since this happened at 12:20 this afternoon. And one of the gentlemen working there at Caltech said that he was in Mexico City for the big earthquake there. And he said that it felt the same intensity. The only difference was that in Mexico City, the shaking continued much longer, and that is what was prompting a lot of that damage, where our shaking only lasted so long. And, you know, it was enough, the intensity, to knock things off the shelves, but not so much to cause all of that damage. So
and that's precisely what we saw in one of our executive producer, Lizzie's home. Maybe we have that video that we can show. That's our station clock shaking right in the newsroom, which sent us all on alert. Here's Lizzie's home. You can just see how much it was shaking. And precisely what you're saying. Watch the bureau there. You can see things are shaking, and you also see the reflection of her cute doggy there. A little worried there, as all of our animals are. And just another reminder, if you're not home and you have a cam, it's always good to check in on your animal. Make sure that nothing fell. Certainly nothing, the smallest thing could fall and be dangerous to a pet home alone.
Absolutely. That would, they could definitely get into that. But it is a reminder to all of us that we do need to be prepared for earthquakes. We know this. It's not if, but when the bigger earthquake happens. And you really should have 3-day supply of food, water, and medication that is for you and all of your family members, including those four-legged family members. Make sure you have enough food and water and any medication for them as well. Also, a good idea to have a point of contact. So often when there is a decent-sized earthquake, everybody's on the phone checking in, and the lines can get bogged down. You can't get through to people. So it's good sometimes to have someone who lives out of state. Everybody knows you call that person and relay your information so that everyone knows where everyone is and if they are okay. And, you know, it certainly helps. I've had that happen one time where, you know, I was checking on family members. The lines were busy. So that was the day we figured out that there's an haunted South Carolina that will be our point of contact, so everybody calls her.
You know, preparedness is so important to remember in times like this where we're not, fortunately, covering any serious damage. And South Pasadena police, of course, they are out in full force, driving around, checking for damage or any down lines, damaged buildings. People aren't home. They go through residential areas to make sure nothing is amiss. And we spoke with the police chief just a few moments ago.
To anybody listening, you know, it's better to be prepared. I keep emergency supplies in enough for 3 days, as we all have been taught. Water, some food, first aid kit, medications that are important to me or my family. But also, one thing we don't think about is our animals and pets, food or medications for them as well. So I encourage everybody, if you haven't done it already, go online. There's some great websites from the federal authorities that can help plan a list if you're not sure what to put on there or what to put in. But I recommend putting one in your house and then, of course, one in your car as well. And if you work in an office building, it's always a great idea to have one at your desk with some extra shoes, extra clothes, just in case you need it. You never know when these things are going to happen, and we certainly don't know what exactly is going to happen. So this one very easily could have broken some windows, knocked tiles down. We're fortunate that it didn't, but it's better to be prepared.
Absolutely. That is Chief Ryan Selinsky from South Pasadena, and we're showing you again a look inside City Hall there in Pasadena, where they did have a broken water pipe as well as a staff member who was stuck in an elevator when this earthquake happened at 12:20. It was 8 miles deep and just southeast of Highland Park, which is near Pasadena there. And we do know the fire alarms went off. Everyone was evacuated, and fire crews came in and they started to search the building to make sure there was no serious damage besides that water pipe that broke and that elevator that got stuck there temporarily. But well, that was the worst of it, which is surprising because even though this was just a 4.4, which there really is no just 4.4, it was a 4.4, but the intensity was so intense.
Well, I have to tell you, being in an elevator during a quake, I think, is high on the list of places they don't want to be. I know. Yes. I've done investigative stories on elevators, and it can be a scary situation. We know that this building was retrofitted, and we believe that elevator, of course, inspected and in working order. But those are tense moments. You know something's going on. Fortunately, it's most likely that elevator had an automatic shut off, as many buildings do. The spokesperson for the city said that they were taken out quickly and safely. But it's something to think about. We just heard a few moments ago seismologist Lucy Jones talking about our building codes and do we have enough? And what she said is that we certainly have enough in place in most of our cities so that buildings won't collapse. But not collapsing is not the entire problem. It's always a worry about the glass, the objects, pipes, gas pipes, all those things. So it's something to keep in mind. Let's go live right now back to LAX.
We do know that we are waiting for the mayor with the Olympic flag, but we're going to get to that a little later. We're focusing on there it is.
Yeah, there
she
go.
is exiting that flight from Paris.
What a sight this is. She received that flag from the first female mayor of Paris just the other night, and now our historic mayor bringing that flag down right off the plane here at the tarmac. She's actually walking into the Delta hangar to be greeted by all these people. What a moment this truly is. And there's Gavin Newsom right there.
That's right. A lot of people greeting her as she brings that flag. It really symbolizes almost a torch, passing the torch, because we will be hosting the 2028 games in Los Angeles. 4 years, the city's certainly trying to get everything ready for the games here 4 years from now. And we all know how quickly 4 years can go. And so there's a lot of work that we know the mayor wants to have done. Including that people mover at the airport. You know, we're going to have so many visitors to our amazing city, and we want the transportation to be ready as well.
You know, it's interesting that we're seeing our first glimpse of the Olympic flag right here at LAX, because really that is the epicenter of preparations right now in this moment, right? We've seen all the construction going on for months and months and months, and it all appears to be going well. So much, Amy, as you know, has to happen across LA to prepare for these games. Security, the topmost priority. We know traveling with the mayor, so many dignitaries, and she did meet with LAPD and LASD while she was there. They had already been there for I think 2 weeks to examine the security situation there and to bring back any new information that they could possibly glean to help us here in Los Angeles. Those preparations have been underway for more than a year. And not just our local authorities, but the Secret Service also involved in these preparations as well, because dignitaries from all over the world will be here. That, of course, is a top concern to federal officials while they were there as well. Certainly, we know that First Lady Jill Biden was over there representing the U.S., and California Senator Alex Padilla was there as well with other dignitaries to enjoy and take part in the games, to support the American team, but also to get down to the serious business of what are they doing in Paris to make those such a resounding success, and how do we bring that here and, of course, do it better here in Southern California in the city of Angeles.
Yes, this is the time when the clock really is ticking now. You know, the countdown is on. The Olympics will be here in 4 years, and, you know, such an amazing city that we are fortunate to live in, and so many people will want to come and enjoy the games here in Los Angeles. So it's certainly an exciting time, and certainly a fun way to kick off these next 4 years as the city prepares for the games. And you're seeing on the right side of your screen the mayor with the Olympic flag at the opening. Is this at the opening? This is closing, correct? The closing ceremonies there where...
I believe that's the closing.
Yes, and she was there getting the flag. That looks like Simone Biles there with her. And now she has been able to travel with the flag from Paris to LA and bring that flag here as LA begins the preparations. That there is Tom Cruise. He was riding on a motorcycle with the flag. Certainly a lot of excitement last night for those closing ceremonies.
Yeah, he actually came out of the sky to some electric guitar with Mission Impossible riffs playing, a small taste, giving Paris and the entire world a small taste of what the world can expect when the Olympic Games return to Los Angeles in 2028. It certainly was such a departure from what we had seen in the opening and closing ceremonies in general in Paris, all steeped in history and highbrow themes and art. And then the Americans came in and said, this is how we do it in America.
Yes, yes. You know, it really is amazing. I was covering the news conference when we were waiting to hear if LA would get the Olympics in 2024, and then we found out, no, we were not going to get it in 2024. We were going to get it in 2028. And of course, Mayor Bass has said that she's so happy that we did not get it in 2024 so that she could be a part of the preparations for the 2028 games. But I remember thinking at that time, Ross, you know, they were making the announcement, and I thought, wow, 2024, it's so long from now. And 2028, oh, that's really a long time from now. But, you know, the games 2024 are in the books, and now we are looking forward to 2028, 4 years from now. And we know that the time will go by quite fast as the city is preparing, doing so much to get ready for the Olympic Games, and
Wow.
you could see lots of folks getting in on all the fun and festivities of bringing that flag here to LA.
Listen, I will tell you, as soon as Simone Biles handed over that flag to Tom Cruise and he put it on the motorcycle and roared out, I thought, here we go,
Yes.
Los Angeles, and now the flag is here. It is really all beginning now.
Yes, it is really an exciting time to see that flag here, and all of those folks that are joining, the mayor and the governor. It's really a special time for the city of LA. Certainly the spotlight shining on us here today as the clock begins. You know, this really is the countdown for the big events.
And so much of the Olympics, surrounding the Olympics, so much of it is, you know, frankly, the business of the Olympics. We know that on the board bringing the Olympics here, so many large figures in the world, because it is a moment for the city of Los Angeles to open its doors to tourism, to the great things we have here in Southern California. Really, the Olympics are for everyone across Los Angeles, and certainly the mayor is doing everything possible to make sure that we reap all of the benefits for all of the efforts that the city is putting in, for all of the things we will have to go through the next 4 years. You know, during the last Olympics, the traffic situation actually was so much better than many people anticipated. They had changed the trucking routes to make sure that that happened more overnight, or shuttles to get people to different places to make sure there wasn't congestion or much inconvenience, and it turned out really well, and we have every reason to believe that this time around it is going to be just as wonderful and most likely even more spectacular.
Absolutely, and you know, the area is so vast, and the sporting events will be taking place all over the Southland. You know, I remember hearing softball out in one area. You know, you've got basketball into it. Perhaps the pool will be ready for that time as well. But, you know, there are so many different sporting events that will be taking place all around, and getting around the city will be a big concern. And we know that the People Mover at LAX is a big project. More money has been put into that project to make sure that it is done, that it is complete in time for the Olympic Games and operating well. And we know that the mayor is really working on so many different things to make sure that the city is ready to welcome athletes from around the world, but also guests from around the world. And, you know, I think like 4 years from now, how many young kids right now are training, getting ready, hoping that they will be competing in 4 years? You know, you think about it, you just never know who will be competing, and some of them are getting ready right now. And what an exciting time. We're seeing, you know, the flag just blowing in the wind, and it really is just a beautiful symbol of what is to come.
Well, and it's a symbol of unity, not only in the games and for good gamesmanship, but a symbol of unity around the world. And last night at the closing ceremonies, there was talk and pleas for world peace, to remember that the Olympics symbolize the unity of all of our nations, all 5 continents, to be precise. And this is really all about coming together and showing the best of human nature, the best of human skill, and throughout history, many times has provided peaceful moments in turbulent times. That plea went out as well last night, and that's a significant thing to talk about as the flag returns here to the U.S., here to Los Angeles, as our own Kamala Harris is part of the Democratic Party ticket, as we're in some turbulent and fraught political times during the last 80 or so days of this presidential race. It's all connected, and the flag symbolizes all of these things: peace, being our best,
Yes.
and succeeding.
Absolutely. And, you know, I like to believe it's coming to the best city in the world, Los Angeles. And, It is such an exciting time. We're watching as some of these athletes are posing with the flag, some of them
What a
draped in
moment.
medals, and it's just such an exciting time to bring that flag home. You know, I was wondering, what happens with that flag while it's here in LA up until the Olympic Games? I wonder where it's stored and what happens. Does it fly anywhere, or is it just safely secure somewhere waiting for 2028 to arrive?
I'm hoping that that flag is going to be flying at City Hall until the games arrive, but you know what? I don't know. So we're going to try to get the answer to that in the next few minutes, because I know our producer Roxanne is on that right now.
Yes, I'm sure she's trying to find out where will the Olympic flag be for the next 4 years, which is, you know, you certainly know that it's going to have to be kept safe, and you know, we'll be flying high for the 2028 games. But what a special time for LA right now, and you know, the bid to get the games and the process is here, and we're watching as so many people are just really embracing this special time. The athletes now posing with the flag there at LAX, and of course the mayor bringing that flag home to the city, and it really is very exciting.
Well, it's just a moment. The mayor is preparing right now at the airport to address the crowd assembled at these athletes, all the dignitaries. The governor is in attendance, and so we're waiting for that moment to happen. So it should be exciting. Such a historic